Recapping week 1 on Fantasy Football Today Express. All right, we're going to start with the injuries. Adam Azer and Jamie Eisenberg here. Let's talk about the Packers passing game. Jordan Love out 3 to 6 weeks with a sprained MCL. Indianapolis, Tennessee, Minnesota, and the Rams are their next 4 games. Do you have any confidence in anyone? You know what? I'll even throw in Josh Jacobs. Do you have any confidence in any Packers while Jordan Love is out?
Just Jacobs, because the nature of running backs and how many touches he'll get. I think he'll, if he wasn't already, just based on the amount of work he was going to get, the 1A in this offense behind Jordan Love, now he's going to be the focal point. So, this is the best way that the Packers have a chance to win, is to, let him set up everything and limit Malik Willis as much as you possibly can. I wouldn't rule out still a signing of maybe somebody like Ryan Tannehill. So that would change some things in the interim of while Love is out, but Malik Willis has just proven to be a very unproven and inept quarterback during the chances that he's got, and I can't imagine things are going to change.
And Ken Walker left with an abdomen injury. Zach Charbonnet, his roster percentage is in the 50s right now. It would be close to 100 if Walker were going to miss time. He said he's fine. So the last 2 injuries I'll talk about, and by the way, we're not talking about the Sunday night injuries. That game is in progress. I know Puka Nacua left. Jamison Williams looks okay. I don't know Puka's status. But David Njoku and Jake Ferguson, they both left with ankle and knee injuries respectively. So if I need a tight end, how much do you believe in Isaiah Likely? I know he's going to be the guy to get, but how much do you believe in him?
I mean, you have to believe in him quite a bit after the targets and the production. This is an offense. It's not necessarily you don't. His position is a tight end, but you don't view him as a tight end in this offense because they just need receiving threats. And so we knew who the top 2 going in were in Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. They just needed to find another guy, and we thought maybe it'd be Rashad Bateman. It could still be Bateman, but with what Likely did in that game against the Chiefs, it's worth buying into at that position. And there were some other guys that stepped up and did some things. Juwan Johnson, for example, caught a touchdown. Was a guy that I liked coming into the season. Mike Gesicki should have had a touchdown. We'll see what happens with somebody, let's say like Tyler Conklin, who 3 straight years of 87 targets, now gets Aaron Rodgers. So there's guys that you can look at this position and say, there's probably going to be a player or 2 that I can add off waivers, but Likely looks like a difference maker. So why wouldn't you try to add that, whether you need to replace Ferguson or Njoku or not?
Okay, let's get into some winners and losers, and talking about maybe the backfield splits, the teams that we learned a lot about today, or we took a step towards learning about today. Simply, I'd say the Titans and the Bengals really stood out in terms of one guy really dominating touches and snaps. I think you and I were talking about it on the previous show. We kind of felt like maybe that was a Jaylen Warren health thing.
Yeah, but at least there was something that changed today, and the Commanders as well, gave us some answers.
Yeah. So what stood out to you?
I'll go back to this. I was a very big Chase Brown proponent, even before training camp when he started getting hype. I just looked at Zack Moss's track record with his injuries and wondered, could he stay healthy, and were we chasing really just another Alexander Madison situation of a guy that has a small sample size of success. So right now, Zack Moss should be viewed as the best Bengals running back. Will he remain the best Bengals running back all season? That's the biggest question. So Moss moving forward, I don't think he's a slam dunk number 2 running back. He didn't do enough to make you say immediate starter, but flex in that conversation, absolutely. For the Titans, I think there was a little bit more separation for Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. We saw it in the one preseason game where Pollard looked a little bit more explosive. And I think that just continued in this game today against the Bears, where they could not do anything. Their best drive was Pollard leading the way and finding the end zone. But both running backs are going to still be involved. And I don't think, again, you panic on Tyjae Spears. But Pollard is now, I think, in the number 2 running back conversation, just based on how he's performed and the amount of touches he got. In Pittsburgh, like you said, Jaylen Warren, injury, hamstring. How much is that an issue? We'll see moving forward. But Najee is going to be in that RB2 range. He was really drafted in that range to begin with. And then for Washington, I think we kind of all shared the same sentiment that we knew Brian Robinson had the chance to be the better of the 2. And he did that coming off of this game. He had work in the passing game before Austin Eckler. He had goal line opportunities in tandem with Jaden Daniels. So we really didn't see much of Eckler until the end of the game. And Robinson, I think, is, worth using as a number 2 running back moving forward.
Yeah, you were very high on Brian Robinson, so that was a good call. And I was really surprised to see the Titans split the way it was. Every indication, the quotes from the coaches, the preseason, looked like they were going to, rotate series. And Spears was the third down back, and Pollard was everything else. So that was interesting. I'm going to go through the top 5 scorers at every position in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. Your top 5 quarterbacks were, going into Sunday night, Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels, and Derek Carr. Mayfield, Allen, Richardson, Daniels, Derek Carr. Any reactions?
I mean, Mayfield and Carr had just fantastic performances. They took advantage of great matchups. I don't think we should worry about the Panthers being problems for opposing quarterbacks. I'll tell you a quick story. I write start sit, then I write a sleepers column for Friday for anybody that hasn't seen it. And it's taking a mixture of the sleepers that are in, start them, sit them, and adding a few to it. And the first name that I wrote down at the quarterback spot was Derek Carr. And I didn't have the guts to use him in the story. So stupid me. But both those guys have the chance, to varying degrees, to be helpful moving forward. We talked a lot about Baker Mayfield in the full length episode, that he could be a borderline QB1 rest of season. He's got great weapons, and the system looks like it's going to be still favorable, even though they lose Canales. For Carr, I think it was just taking advantage of the Panthers. I like to see him do it again, even though, again, new coordinator. He looked good in the system for today.
I know the Panthers are a different team than they were last year. They're worse, clearly, but I think they gave up the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks last year. He carved them up. So running backs, top 5 running backs. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. We got to take a break. We're going to take a break on FFT Express, and we'll talk about the best running backs and others after this. Saquon Barkley was your number 1 running back with 32 fantasy points. Number 2 was Joe Mixon, 25 PPR fantasy points on 30 carries. J.K. Dobbins, Devon Achane, and then tied for 5th, Alvin Kamara and Ramondre Stevenson. It felt like a pretty damn good week for running backs, but Barkley, Mixon, Dobbins, Achane, Kamara, and Stevenson, your top 6, all of them 21 or more PPR points.
Yeah, unfortunately, Bijan wasn't in that group, and we'll see how Christian McCaffrey and Breece Hall do. But the fun ones, clearly J.K. Dobbins. The touches still favored Gus Edwards. I don't know what the playing time was in terms of the split between the two of them, but Dobbins showed you that he's a difference maker, and hopefully he stays healthy. Maybe the Chargers are just going to limit his touches and hope that he breaks off a couple long runs, but he's going to work himself quickly into the starting fantasy conversation. And you know me, I've always liked him. I didn't draft enough of him this offseason because I was a little concerned, but if he stays healthy in this offense, my goodness, let's go J.K. Dobbins. I think and this is probably relevant to someone like you, that you talked a lot about this, and Walker was not far off, but the Walker, Mixon, Kamara range, these guys all delivered in a big way. And so if you went receiver, or if you wanted to get 2 running backs with your first 4 picks, it paid off for you to draft those guys. So that was fun.
Yeah, no, I think in general, it's just the top. I always forget if it was 17 or 18 running backs who said that's the cutoff. Well, it was a good week, I'd say, overall for that group. Really hard to find a big disappointment. Even Derrick Henry scored a touchdown. It wasn't like there was a terrible. I might be missing one, but
Achane was good. James Cook wasn't awful.
Right, like nobody was like horrible.
Pacheco
scored. Henry scored. Jacobs was fine. He had 12.
Close start, but he picked it up at the end. Yep.
ETN had 11 because the fumble. He almost had 2 touchdowns. Yeah.
I know we're not talking about Sunday night, but Gibbs scored too. So
Gibbs scored, and Puka, by the way, came back in the game. Wide receivers, Jaden Reed is number 1 with 32 points. Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, A.J. Brown, Chris Godwin. Jaden Reed, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, A.J. Brown, Chris Godwin.
Reed is an interesting case. It would be nice to see if Jordan Love stayed healthy, or comes back and is, being that guy. He looked great. He really did, and I got a lot of, flack for saying Watson's the more explosive of the two. I wonder how much the field played into that. I saw Dave had a funny tweet. Jaden Reed's the only one that brought the right cleats, because they were slipping all over the place, those guys. But it was nice to see Watson get the end zone target. But look, Jaden Reed we said there are 2 that you draft, and 2 that you maybe draft in Dobbs and Wicks, and Reed was just absolutely fantastic. So hopefully Malik Willis or whoever's playing quarterback for them doesn't ruin what could be a great second-year season for him. Evans, great first game. He got a little bit banged up.
Why don't we look at this, right? Mayfield's QB1, and Godwin and Evans are both top 5.
Took advantage of Washington. Yep.
Ride it out or try to sell them?
I don't think you're selling the receivers yet. Mayfield, if he's your guy, Mayfield's on your bench, you can try and sell him. But look, I could certainly be wrong about Evans. He could just continue to defy father time. 31 years old now, off a great start. If there's one to sell it for me, it would be Evans of the two receivers.
Lastly, let's take just real quick. Give me a minute on the tight ends here. Likely way ahead of the field, 26 fantasy points. Up next, Foster Morrow at 14. Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, Juwan Johnson. Those are the only 5.
Just fun.
Yeah, those are the only 5 who scored double-digit PPR fantasy points. Likely, Morrow, Pitts, Bowers, Juwan Johnson.
Yes.
And only 2 of them had more than 4 targets, by the way. Likely and Bowers. I think Bowers is obviously we talked about Likely, but Bowers to me feels like the story here. 6 catches for 58 yards on 8 targets. Pretty good for a debut.
Yes, and could only get better from here. The offense was bad, really, for the most part, for the Raiders. Just in terms of being productive, finding the end zone. But that's a clear bright spot, and I think it could come at the expense of Devontae Adams, as we saw.
Look at I think only 3 tight ends going into Sunday night had more than 5 targets. Likely, McBride,
it's crazy.
Bowers. This position's garbage.
You're the tight end.
Well, we'll see. Okay, everybody, have a great evening or morning whenever you're listening to this, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on FFT Express.